The night I realized my husband was sleeping with our daughter's teacher, something inside me snapped. I didn't scream or throw things. I just quietly decided neither of them would ever forget what they'd done. My name is Ann Miller, and until about 8 months ago, my life in Colorado was the kind of quiet, predictable routine people say they want. I worked as a nurse at a community hospital on the west side of the city. My husband Tom worked as a delivery driver, mostly regional routes. Some days he'd be gone before sunrise. We'd been married 12 years. And we had one daughter, Sarah, who had just started 7th grade at Westbrook Middle School. We weren't one of those couples posting smiling vacation photos every weekend. But we also weren't fighting. We paid the mortgage. We ate dinner together. We showed up to Sarah's school events. Normal. That's the word I keep coming back to. Looking back now, the changes started slowly. Slow enough that at the time I brushed them off as nothing. Tom started working later. At first it sounded reasonable. One evening he came through the front door around 9, loosening his jacket while I was wiping down the kitchen counter. "Long route?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. Dispatcher added an extra stop out near Aurora. Whole thing turned into a mess. I shrugged. Delivery work can be unpredictable. I'd seen his schedule change before. But then it started happening more often. Late nights. Last-minute route changes. Random extra shifts. And around the same time, Tom started doing something else that felt strange. He started caring a lot more about how he looked. One Saturday morning, he came out of the bedroom wearing a brand new button-down shirt I'd never seen before. I raised an eyebrow. "Since when do delivery drivers dress like they're going to a job interview?" Tom grinned and tugged at the collar. "Hey, a man can upgrade his wardrobe." I said. A week later, he got a new haircut. Then he bought cologne. Tom had never worn cologne in the entire time I'd known him. One night while he was getting ready for work, I leaned against the bathroom door frame watching him comb his hair. "You trying to impress somebody at the warehouse?" I joked. He laughed and said something that, at the time, felt like nothing. "Yeah," he said. "My work wife." I remember rolling my eyes. "A work wife?" "Just a joke," he said. "One of the teachers over at Sarah's school works in the same office complex where I do paperwork sometimes. We run into each other in the lobby." People started teasing us about it. I remember saying, "Wow, you've got a whole second marriage I didn't know about." He laughed again. And that was it. At the time, it really did feel like a harmless joke. The first time I saw Kate Adams, I didn't even realize who she was. It was early September, just a couple weeks into the school year. Westbrook Middle School was hosting their annual open house night where parents walk through the building, meet the teachers, and pretend they understand how their kids manage to have 7 different classes a day. Tom came with me. That should have been my first clue something was different. Tom had never been particularly interested in school events before. Usually I went alone while he stayed home watching football. But that night he insisted on coming. "I should probably meet Sarah's teachers," he said casually while grabbing his jacket. I remember smiling because I thought it was sweet. We spent about an hour walking through the hallways packed with parents and kids. Sarah ran ahead of us most of the night, bouncing from classroom to classroom with her friends. At one point we stopped outside the English classroom where a young teacher with shoulder-length brown hair was talking to a group of parents. Tom slowed down slightly when we passed her. I noticed it, but only for a second. Teachers are usually younger these days. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. I didn't think anything about it. Sarah tugged on my arm. "Mom, that's Ms. Adams," she said. "She's my English teacher." Kate Adams. That was the first time I heard her name. She looked friendly enough. Smiling, laughing with parents, answering questions. At one point, she glanced over toward us in the hallway. Her eyes landed on Tom for a second longer than normal. Then she smiled politely and went back to her conversation. I didn't think about that moment again for months. Looking back now, it feels like watching the first scene of a movie where the audience already knows what's going to happen. But the characters don't. The months after that open house are kind of a blur in my memory. Life was busy. Hospital shifts. Sarah's homework. Grocery runs. Laundry piling up. Tom kept working later and later. Most nights he'd come home tired, grab a quick shower, then collapse on the couch scrolling through his phone. Our conversations got shorter. Not hostile. Just distant. Like we were 2 people sharing the same house, but living separate lives. One evening I asked Sarah how school was going while we were cleaning up after dinner. She shrugged. "Fine." "Any favorite teachers yet?" She thought about it. "Ms. Adams is pretty cool." I nodded absently. "What'd she teach again?" "English." Sarah grabbed her backpack and started heading toward the stairs. "Oh," she added casually, "I think she has a boyfriend now." I looked up from the sink. "You know that already?" "Yeah," Sarah said. "Some of the teachers were talking about it. She met someone who works near the school." I didn't think anything of that either. Why would I? Teachers date people. Adults meet each other at work all the time. At that point my brain still believed my life was normal. It took one small moment to destroy that illusion. A random night in October. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner while Tom sat at the table finishing a sandwich before heading out for another late shift. My phone was charging in the living room. I needed to check the time before starting the dishwasher. Tom's phone was sitting on the table next to his keys. So I picked it up. Just to glance at the screen. That's when the message popped up. And everything started to fall apart. The message appeared while I was still holding Tom's phone. One simple notification. Kate Adams. Today was fun. Same time next week. For a second my brain didn't react at all. It just stared at the screen like it couldn't process what it was reading. Kate Adams. The name echoed in my head. Then the pieces started sliding together in the worst possible way. Sarah's teacher. The open house. Tom's work wife joke. My stomach dropped so suddenly I had to grip the edge of the table. Tom was upstairs grabbing his jacket. I could hear the closet door sliding open. For a moment I thought about putting the phone back down and pretending I'd never seen the message. But before I could move, another text appeared. Kate Adams. Thursday after conferences works for me. Conferences. Parent-teacher conferences. My hands started shaking. Without thinking, I opened the message thread. The conversation stretched back months. Coffee plans. Jokes. Little comments that looked harmless at first glance, but felt poisonous once you understood the context. One message from Tom said, "Hard to keep a straight face when Anne's sitting right there." Another from Kate replied, "I almost laughed when you kicked my chair under the table." My heart started pounding so loudly I could barely hear the house around me. I kept scrolling. There were photos of coffee cups. A picture of Tom's truck parked outside a cafe. Then a message from Kate that made my chest tighten. "You're brave coming to conferences with your wife." Tom had replied, "Worth it to see you." I stopped reading. My hands felt numb. 12 years of marriage. All of it suddenly rearranging itself in my head. The late nights. The new shirts. The cologne. The open house. The way she'd looked at him in that hallway. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. I set the phone down on the table just as Tom came back downstairs. He grabbed his keys. Heading out, he said casually. I didn't move. "Tom," I said quietly. He paused. "Yeah." I slid his phone across the table toward him. "I think you forgot something." He picked it up. His eyes moved to the screen. For a split second, his entire face froze. Then he forced a smile. "It's not what it looks like." That sentence. Every cheating husband in the world must have the same script. I crossed my arms. "Your messages with Kate Adams say otherwise." The color drained from his face. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he exhaled slowly and sat down across from me. "And listen." "No," I said. My voice surprised even me. It was calm. Flat. "Actually, you listen." I leaned forward slightly. "You're sleeping with our daughter's teacher." Tom rubbed his hands over his face. "It's not." "Don't," I said quietly. He stopped. Silence filled the kitchen. Finally, he spoke again. "It just happened." I almost laughed. People don't accidentally fall into 5 months of text messages. His eyes snapped up. 5 months. "So that's about right?" I said. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I felt something inside my chest go cold. "How did it start?" I asked. Tom hesitated. Then he leaned back in the chair. "Open house night." The room suddenly felt smaller. "She recognized the company logo on my jacket," he said. "Her apartment is near one of my delivery stops." We started talking. And then, we ran into each other a few more times. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "And then lunch." "And then you started sleeping together," I finished. Tom looked down at the table. "Yeah." My hands tightened against my arms. "And all this time," I said quietly, "she's been teaching Sarah." Tom immediately shook his head. "I didn't plan that part." I stared at him. "She was already assigned to Sarah's class before we started seeing each other." "You expect me to believe that's better?" I asked. He didn't answer. The kitchen clock ticked loudly on the wall. Finally, he leaned forward. "And it's not serious." That sentence almost made me laugh again. "You're risking our marriage for something that's not serious?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I just got caught up in it." 5 months is a long time to be caught up. Silence again. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since I read those messages. "Does she know who I am?" Tom looked up. "Yes." "And she still sits in a classroom teaching our daughter every day?" His voice dropped. "Yes." That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a rope finally giving way under too much tension. I stood up from the table. Tom immediately stood too. "And wait." I turned to face him. "You have 2 options." He frowned. "What?" "You end this," I said. "Completely. No messages. No coffee. Nothing." Tom nodded quickly. "Okay. Yeah. Of course. And then we start counseling." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue. I raised a hand. Or, I said calmly, I report the relationship to the school. Tom froze. You wouldn't do that. Try me. His face went pale. And that could destroy her career. I stared at him. You already destroyed my marriage. The room went quiet again. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay. His voice was barely above a whisper. I'll end it. For 2 days I tried to believe him. 2 days of pretending our life could somehow rewind back to normal. Then on the third night, Tom fell asleep on the couch while watching television. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't even hesitate this time. I picked it up. Another message from Kate Adams. Miss you already. I stared at the screen. Tom had replied 20 minutes earlier. Soon. That was the moment I stopped trying to save my marriage. Instead, I started deciding how to end it. The moment I read Tom's reply soon, something inside me settled. Not rage. For 2 days he had looked me in the eye and promised the affair was over. 2 days. And he couldn't even last 48 hours. I stood there in the dim living room, Tom asleep on the couch with the television flickering quietly across his face, holding the phone in my hand. In that moment, the decision stopped feeling complicated. I walked upstairs to the small desk in our bedroom, opened my laptop, and started writing an email. I didn't write it quickly. I took my time. I explained that my husband, Tom Miller, had been involved in an ongoing relationship with Kate Adams, a teacher at Westbrook Middle School. I explained that my daughter, Sarah Miller, was currently a student in her class. I attached screenshots of the messages. When I finished, I read the email twice. Then I sent it to the school administration. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. Hospitals have a strange way of keeping you grounded. When you're dealing with patients and emergencies, your personal life almost fades into the background. But around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. An email reply from the school. The subject line read, Request for meeting, Westbrook Middle School Administration. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a quiet office of the school. Across from me were Dan White, the principal, and Beth White, the assistant principal. Dan White folded his hands on the desk. Mrs. Miller, he said gently, thank you for coming in. I nodded. Neither of them looked surprised. Beth White glanced down at a printed stack of papers in front of her. My screenshots. We've reviewed the information you sent, she said. The room was painfully quiet. Dan White cleared his throat. Relationships between staff members and parents can create serious conflicts of interest, especially when a student is directly involved. I just nodded again. He looked at me carefully. Did you speak with Ms. Adams about this situation? No, I said. And your husband? Yes. Another pause. Beth White closed the folder slowly. We'll be conducting a formal review. That was all they would say. I left the school feeling strangely calm. The kind of calm you get when a decision has already been made and there's no turning back. Tom found out 2 days later. I was making dinner when he stormed into the kitchen holding his phone. What did you do? I looked up from the stove. What are you talking about? Kate got pulled into a meeting with the principal today. His voice was shaking with anger. They're investigating her. I turned off the burner. Yes, I said quietly. They are. Tom stared at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You actually reported it. You didn't end the affair. That's not the point, he snapped. I blinked slowly. That's exactly the point. He paced across the kitchen, running both hands through his hair. And you could ruin her career. I crossed my arms. You and Kate ruined my marriage. That's different. No, I said. It isn't. He stopped pacing and looked at me. You did this out of revenge. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. But at that moment, I didn't feel like explaining the difference between revenge and consequences. The investigation didn't take long. Within 2 weeks, Kate Adams was placed on administrative leave. A month later, she resigned from Westbrook Middle School. The stories spread quietly through the community. Schools are like small towns. News travels fast. Suddenly, everyone seemed to have an opinion about what happened. Some people thought I did the right thing. My friend Rose Clark was firmly on my side. We were sitting at a small table inside Golden Grain Bakery, owned by Jane Taylor, when she said it bluntly. You didn't ruin anything, Rose said, stirring her coffee. They did. Across the table, Jane shifted uncomfortably. I just think it's complicated, she said carefully. How? Rose asked. Jane hesitated. Well, it was a private affair. Rose leaned back in her chair. It stopped being private when it involved a teacher and a student's parent. Jane didn't argue with that. But not everyone agreed. Tom's friend Bob Taylor called me a week later. You took it too far, he said over the phone. They made their choices, I replied. Yeah, but you didn't have to destroy someone's career over it. I ended the call after that. Tom moved out shortly after Kate resigned. For a while, he stayed with Bob. The strangest part came a few months later. Once everything was public, Tom and Kate decided they could finally date openly. No secrecy. No hiding. Just a normal relationship. Apparently, that lasted about 3 months. One afternoon, Tom showed up at the house to pick up a few boxes of his things. Sarah was at a friend's house, so it was just the two of us standing in the living room. He looked tired. Older somehow. "How are things with Kate?" I asked quietly. Tom shrugged. "We broke up." I didn't react. Turns out things are different when you're not sneaking around. I nodded slowly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me. "You know," he said, "we could start over." I actually laughed. Not loudly. Just enough to make the point clear. "Tom," I said, "that version of our life doesn't exist anymore." He looked like he wanted to argue. But instead, he just picked up the last box and walked out the door. Now it's been about 8 months since everything happened. The house is quieter. Sometimes too quiet. But it's peaceful. Sarah seems happier too. Kids notice more than we think. Every once in a while I still wonder if I went too far. If I should have handled everything privately. If exposing the relationship was really necessary. But then I remember sitting in that school hallway months earlier, realizing the woman teaching my daughter every day was secretly involved with my husband. And the anger comes back. Not loud. Not explosive. Just steady. Like a reminder. Because betrayal doesn't just break your heart. Sometimes it forces you to decide exactly how much you're willing to tolerate before you finally say enough. And when that moment comes, you either stay silent. Or you change everything. I guess my choice was pretty clear. But I'm still curious what other people think. Did I cross a line by reporting the affair, or was it simply the consequence of the situation they created?